Hello, shut up. Hello, my name's Andy Stanton. I'm a famous children's author. And guess what as well, I've just remembered, I'm definitely a professor of history. Because otherwise, how could I have written this very accurate historical book called Natboff, 1 Million Years of Stupidity, which is just packed full of absolutely true history. Do you want to hear some of it? Of course you do. I'm going to read you a historical account of the plague from 1665 that befell Lamonic Bibber. Lord Famous and the Plague. It was a Wednesday afternoon in the middle of the 17th century when it all began. A famous lord called Lord Famous was lying around in his parlour having a live stag stuffed down his throat by his servants, when in rushed a messenger so red in the face that at first Lord Famous thought he was an enormous cherry on legs. Enormous cherries on legs were quite common in those days, so it was an easy enough mistake to make. Immediately, Lord Famous jumped up, wiped an antler from his lips and popped the messenger's head into his mouth. He was just about to bite it in half to get at the lovely cherry juice inside, but luckily his servant, a wise fellow by the name of Fiddle Me Riddle Me Buckler, spoke up just in time. "Lord Famous," said Fiddle Me Riddle Me Buckler, "that is not an enormous cherry on legs, it is a messenger. Spit him out at once." So Lord Famous spat out the red-faced messenger, who collapsed on the floor in a heap of other red-faced messengers that Lord Famous had recently tried to eat, thinking that they too were enormous cherries on legs. "Hello," said the messenger, getting up and wiping the spit from his eyes, his face redder than ever. "I am a—" But before he could continue, Lord Famous had pounced on him and was trying to eat him again. That was the thing about Lord Famous. He loved enormous cherries on legs, and also he never learned from his mistakes. "Lord Famous," shouted Fiddle Me Riddle Me Buckler, "spit that young man out, for he is no cherry, as I told you before." "Oh yes," said Lord Famous, spitting out the messenger again. "All right, now, what is it you have run these many miles to tell? What could be so important that you would come in here and disturb my luncheon?" To be honest, it was difficult not to disturb Lord Famous's luncheon, as it lasted from 6 o'clock in the morning until 5:58 the next morning. He was always eating, and he would eat anything he could get his mouth on. Stags, geese, porcupines, a horse that had fallen over by the side of the road, walnuts, all sorts of things. Once he had invented a massive tube about 300 miles long, which he would hold to his mouth. Then he'd point the other end into the air and just suck birds out of the sky and swallow them whole. He really was quite a greedy man. Not the greediest in the country, perhaps, but definitely in the top 20. In between his luncheons, Lord Famous had 2 minutes in which to sleep, go to the toilet, write his memoirs, hang people for being poor, and talk to his wife. So it wasn't very easy being a lord in those days, as you can see. There were all sorts of things to do, and hardly any time to do them in, and all because of luncheon. "What could be so important that you would come in here and disturb my luncheon?" repeated Lord Famous now. "Or," he added hopefully, "are you in fact not a messenger at all, but instead an enormous cherry on legs?" Lord Famous opened his mouth wide once more, but luckily the messenger spoke up in the nick of time. "Lord Famous," said the messenger, "I bring bad tidings from London town. Men are dropping in the streets. Women are dropping in the streets. Children are dropping in the streets. Everyone is dropping in the streets. It is dreadful and quite noisy. And the reason, Lord Famous, is a plague. Yes, a horrible plague, which is sweeping that fair city." "How does it spread?" bellowed Lord Famous so loudly that his wig flew off, shot out the window and exploded in a nearby field. "It is spread by rats and fleas," said the messenger. "They carry the plague inside their bodies, and do you know why? It is because they hate people and want to take over the world." "Stupid rats and fleas," said Lord Famous. "Well, thanks for telling me about the plague, but if it's all the way down in London, what harm can it do us here?" But the messenger uttered not another word, for he had suddenly died of the plague. He had bright purple boils all over his face and neck, and there were dozens of rats and fleas running all over him. And now Lord Famous trembled, for his house had become not just a house of luncheon, but a house of luncheon and horrible plague. "Fiddle me riddle me buckler," cried Lord Famous. "What are we to do?" But Fiddle Me Riddle Me Buckler uttered not a word, because he too had suddenly died of the plague, and was lying there covered in his own boils and rats and fleas. "Never mind," said Lord Famous. "Fiddle me, riddle me, Buckler wasn't a very good character anyway. I'd better see how my wife's doing, though," he added. "I quite like her." And if you want to know how Lord Famous's wife was doing, here's a hint. Not very well, she died of the plague. Anyway, if you want to know what's going on in there, surprises, spoilers, then you'll just have to carry on reading, because it's history, isn't it? It's good for your brains, and every word, 100% live true.